Hi, my name's Olivia, and today we're going to be talking about the cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Oxygen is needed in almost all living things, and your internal organs and tissues all require a constant supply of oxygen in order for them to function. Luckily, you have your respiratory system and cardiovascular system to supply that oxygen. These systems being your heart and lungs that work together like best friends to sustain everyday life. The heart consists of four separate chambers. The upper chambers, called atria, aka the right atrium and left atrium, and the lower chambers, called ventricles, aka the right ventricle and left ventricle. These upper and lower chambers are separated by the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves that flow from the atria to the ventricles. Your heart is also made up of the muscle tissue called myocardium, which allows electrical signals to flow from cell to cell due to the muscle cells being interconnected. These muscle cells have the ability to contract through electrical stimulation that excites them. A way to remember this is when you get excited and laugh, you contract your abdominal muscles, just like how your heart contracts when its cells get excited through the electrical stimulation. Alright, now that we have a little overview of the respiratory and cardiovascular system under our belt, let's talk about blood circulation. Let's talk about blood circulation. But before I start talking about that, just familiarize yourself with these terms on the screen right now. So when I talk about them in a second, you don't get too confused. All right, now that you have hopefully kind of familiarized yourself with those terms, let's talk about blood circulation. So, deoxygenated blood will be delivered from the superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava into the right atrium, which is right here. And then the SA node will receive an electrical signal, the SA node, which is right here, and it will go down the internodal pathways, telling the upper half of the heart to contract. This will push the deoxygenated blood through the tricuspid valve into the left ventricle right here. Then the AV node is going to receive a signal, and it will be sent through the bundle of down the bundle of His to the right and left branches, all the way to the Purkinje fibers, where that signal will now tell the bottom half of the heart to contract. And this will push the deoxygenated blood all the way up to the pulmonary seminal artery out into the lungs. Now, before I talk about the lungs, I just want to talk about why the top of the half contracts before the bottom half of the heart. So this happens because if the top of the heart and the bottom of the heart were to contract at the same time, all the blood would just get pushed into the middle of the heart and it would pool right here, and then it wouldn't go anywhere because the heart would just keep pushing the blood into the middle of the heart. But since we have the top of the heart contracting first, the blood gets pushed down here, and then the half of the heart contracts and it gets pushed out. So by this happening, the blood doesn't get pooled in the center of the heart. Now, the deoxygenated blood will travel through the lungs where the blood becomes oxygenated, and there is a removal of CO2, which you will exhale. Alright, now that our blood is nice and oxygenated from the lungs, the oxygenated blood is going to be brought back through the pulmonary veins found right here into the left atrium, where the pacemaker is going to send a signal to the internodal pathways, telling the upper half of the heart to contract. This will push the oxygenated blood through the bicuspid valves right here into the left ventricle, and as this is happening, the signal is going to pass through the AV node, down the bundle of His, down the left and right branches into the Purkinje fiber, telling the lower half of the heart to contract. And this will push the oxygenated blood up into the aorta for the upper half of your body, or down into your thoracic aorta into the lower half of your body, so all your muscles can get the nutrients and oxygen that they need. Now, there's one important thing that I would like to note here. As you can see, the pulmonary veins are red and they carry oxygenated blood instead of deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood instead of oxygenated blood like it normally would. This is the one exception to the rule. So it's important to remember that the pulmonary veins will carry oxygenated blood, even though veins typically carry deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary artery will carry deoxygenated blood, even though arteries carry oxygenated blood. And now that we've talked about this, I'm going to get into how the blood spreads to your muscles. All right, now that your blood is on its way to the muscles, your arteries will branch out into arterial in and arterial will control your blood pressure and flow throughout your body, and then your blood will be carried to capillaries. Now these capillaries are the smallest blood vessel in your body, as they barely are big enough to even fit a single red blood cell. These capillaries allow the transfer of oxygen into your muscles through the process of diffusion, as the oxygen is moving from a high to low concentration. So here's the oxygen going into your muscles, your oxygen and nutrients that the blood carries. And now these capillaries lose the oxygen in your blood, so it gets deoxygenated and has to go back to the heart to get reoxygenated through the venules into your veins as you get closer to the heart, and to repeat the whole process that we were talking about earlier. But how will your blood make its way back up to your heart if it's coming from the bottom area of your body down here? Because it has to defy gravity. Well, let's talk about it. The first way is called the skeletal muscle pump. This is when your muscles contract. The contraction will increase the pressure within the vein, pushing the blood up with some help from the one-way valves found in your veins that will close, stopping the blood to fall back down as it travels back towards the heart. As you can see in this photo, the female is walking and contracting her muscles, which will push the blood back up to her heart. The second way the blood makes its way back to the heart is with the assist of the thoracic pump. When you breathe, the pressure in your abdominal cavity increases, whereas the pressure in your chest decreases. This makes the pressure on your veins in your abdomen increase, pushing the blood up towards the heart. The last way that the blood goes back to your heart is by a system that assists the return of blood. This involves the response of vasoconstriction, which is when a signal gets sent out to your veins to constrict slightly to increase blood flow during the time that your cardiac output needs to be increased. But what is cardiac output? Cardiac output is the amount of blood that is pumped out of your left ventricle in 1 minute and is measured in liters, with the average person's output being 5 to 6 liters per minute compared to 30 to 36 liters per minute during heavy exercise. There are two factors that heavily influence your cardiac output, which are stroke volume and heart rate. When you multiply these two factors together, you can get the cardiac output of yourself. Your stroke volume is the amount of blood that leaves your left ventricle per heartbeat, which is measured in milliliters. You can calculate your SV by subtracting your left ventricular and systolic volume from your left ventricular and diastolic volume. And your heart rate is the number of times your heart contracts per minute. As you exercise, your cardiac output will significantly increase due to more blood flow needed in your muscles. During intense exercise, your muscles will receive 67% more blood flow than at rest. This is due to your muscles needing to produce more ATP to continue the exercise, while the amount of blood flow needed to the other areas of your body will decrease, except for your heart, which will maintain a 4% amount of blood flow. There are three main functions of the respiratory system. These are the removal of CO2 from the bloodstream, a constant supply of oxygen to the blood to help create ATP for muscles and other functions. As you breathe, the body undergoes two kinds of respiration. External respiration, which refers to the process of the exchange of O2 and CO2 in the lungs, and internal respiration, which is the exchange of gases where the O2 is delivered and the CO2 is removed. From here, the oxygen can go through cellular respiration to create energy. In order for the body to supply itself this oxygen, we first must breathe in the oxygen. This is done in the conductive zone, where the molecules of oxygen will go through your nasal cavity or mouth to your epiglottis, pharynx, larynx, trachea, into your lungs, where your primary and secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchioles, and terminal bronchioles are. The conductive zone also ensures that the oxygen is at body temperature when it reaches your respiratory zone. This is to maintain body temperature and protect the sensitive tissues in your respiratory zone. The respiratory zone is where your respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and the alveolar sacs are found. These structures allow the exchange of gas between the air and blood. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you've learned more about the respiratory system and cardiovascular system.